Hi guys, how are you all? I'm back today with a new horror story, and honestly, the one I'm about to tell you is something that shook me in a way I still can't fully explain, because this time the story wasn't sent to me by someone from a forest town, or from some abandoned building, or from some faraway village, but from right in the heart of the United States. From a place so famous and so infamous that even hearing its name gives people chills, and the story I received came from someone who experienced the aftermath so closely that when he mailed me the details, his voice notes were trembling, and he kept telling me, "Brother, please tell this story exactly as it happened, because people need to know that real horror doesn't always hide in jungles or in shadows, it sometimes hides in the elevators you walk into every single day." Today's story is about the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles, a place that looks ordinary from the outside, just a tall building with old architecture, but inside it, so many strange things have happened over the decades that people say the hotel itself breathes darkness, and this story revolves around a girl named Elisa Lam, a Canadian student who came to Los Angeles on a solo trip, not knowing that the place she'd chosen to stay had a history soaked in mystery, tragedy, and unexplainable incidents. The person who contacted me, let's call him Daniel, used to work near the hotel, and he told me that before the whole case became world news, he had seen Elisa once or twice in the lobby, always alone, always looking a little lost, like someone trying to find something but not quite sure what. Daniel told me that he didn't think much of it back then, because the Cecil Hotel often had unusual guests, people traveling alone, people acting strangely, people talking to themselves, so he didn't imagine that this particular girl would soon become the center of one of the most chilling mysteries in modern American history. Daniel said he remembered the exact week everything started going wrong. It was late January, chilly evenings in Los Angeles, and Elisa had just checked into the hotel. She was updating her blog regularly, exploring the city, visiting bookstores, coffee shops, museums, but on the evening everything changed. Daniel noticed something in her eyes that he still can't forget. He had seen her walking toward the elevator area, moving slowly, almost hesitating, as if she felt someone watching her. He told me she kept looking over her shoulder, repeatedly scanning the empty hallway like she was waiting for someone to appear, even though no one was there. At that moment, Daniel felt uneasy for reasons he couldn't explain. A few days passed, and suddenly the staff realized Elisa hadn't been seen anywhere. She wasn't returning to her room, she wasn't checking out, she wasn't responding to calls, and the hotel management, already used to dealing with strange guests, assumed she might have gone out somewhere for a couple of days. But her belongings were still in the room, neatly arranged, her clothes folded, her laptop on the bed. Nothing had been touched. The police were called, posters were put up, and slowly, the atmosphere around the hotel became heavy, almost suffocating, like the building itself knew something terrible had happened. Then came the moment that would change everything. The police released the elevator footage. And Daniel said the city froze. People watched the video over and over again, trying to understand what they were seeing, because in the footage, Elisa behaved in a way no one could explain. She stepped into the elevator, pressed multiple buttons with shaky fingers, then hid in the corner as if someone was chasing her, but the hallway behind her was completely empty. The elevator refused to move. She kept peeking outside like someone was standing right there, just beyond the frame, someone only she could see. At one point, she started making strange hand gestures, moving her arms in ways that looked like she was communicating with something invisible, and Daniel told me that when he watched the video for the first time, he felt such a cold wave go through his body that he couldn't sleep the entire night. He said the hotel staff whispered among themselves, wondering if she was affected by something inside the building, because the Cecil was known for its dark aura, its violent past, suicides, murders, strange deaths, and people often said they felt like the hallways had eyes, like shadows slipped around corners when you weren't looking. Days passed, and still no sign of Elisa. People were whispering theories, some logical, many not. The water in the hotel started acting strangely, dirty, discolored, sometimes with a strange taste. Guests complained, the staff checked the pipes, but nothing seemed wrong. Yet the water kept getting worse. And then one morning, everything shifted. One of the maintenance workers went up to the rooftop to inspect the water tanks, climbing the ladders, walking across the cold concrete, the air strangely still. He opened one of the tanks, and what he found inside would haunt everyone connected to the case forever. Daniel told me that when the news broke, the entire neighborhood fell silent, as if the city itself was grieving. People stopped in the streets, stunned, horrified, unable to understand how such a thing could happen. And the worst part wasn't just the discovery, it was the questions it raised, questions no one could answer logically. Daniel told me that night he barely slept, because for the first time, he felt as if the Cecil Hotel wasn't just haunted by memories of past tragedies, it was still alive, still hungry, still pulling people into its darkness. He said something happened there, something no one talks about openly, but the elevator footage, Elisa's behavior, the rooftop, all of it only made sense if you accepted one possibility, that Elisa encountered something in that hotel that wasn't human. What happened next is something that even today experts, investigators, and people who worked inside that hotel refuse to talk about openly, and honestly, I don't blame them, because whatever followed Elisa out of that elevator didn't just guide her footsteps, it consumed her entire final hours inside the Cecil Hotel. Look, I told you earlier, the Cecil wasn't just any random downtown building. It was a place soaked in decades of tragedy, crime, and paranormal energy so thick you could feel it pressing against your skin the moment you walked inside the lobby. Former employees said they could hear footsteps in empty hallways, doors opening on their own, whispers coming from vents when no one was on the floor, and security guards would avoid doing night rounds alone. And the strange part? Elisa had no idea about any of that when she checked in. According to the person who emailed me, the guest who stayed just 2 rooms away from Elisa, he said that the night after the elevator footage was recorded, he heard something walking around the hallway at around 3 a.m. Not someone, something. Heavy, dragging steps, like bare feet soaked in water slapping against the carpet. At first he thought it was Elisa herself, maybe restless, maybe wandering, but the sound, he said it didn't sound human. He described it as uneven, broken, like someone who didn't know how to walk properly, or something imitating the sound of a person walking but not fully understanding how to behave like one. It went back and forth in front of his room for almost 15 minutes before it stopped abruptly, as if whatever it was suddenly realized he was listening from behind the door. He said he held his breath because he could feel it standing right outside his room, silent, like it was waiting for him to make a sound. Then, after what felt like a whole minute of dead quiet, he heard a low whisper, so faint, he wasn't even sure if it was real or his mind playing tricks on him. A whisper that sounded like it came from directly beneath the door. "Where is she?" The guy said his entire body went numb. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe properly until the footsteps finally drifted away. He didn't sleep at all that night. He packed his bag the next morning, ready to request a room change, but when he went to the front desk, something even stranger happened. The hotel clerk looked exhausted, stressed, like he hadn't slept in days. Before the man could even say anything, the clerk said, "If you're here to ask about the noise last night, don't. We're trying to deal with it." Deal with it? What does that even mean? Hotels don't deal with footsteps in hallways. They deal with plumbing issues, broken lights, guest complaints, not whatever was roaming around the Cecil's upper floors that night. And while all of this was happening, Elisa had already gone missing. She didn't show up for her checkout, didn't respond to family messages, and when hotel staff went to her room, they found all her belongings neatly arranged, laptop open, clothes folded, but Elisa was gone. Here's where things get even more unsettling. According to the guest who emailed me, the police searched every accessible area of the hotel for days, every floor, every staircase, the lobby, storage rooms, even the basement. But guess what? They didn't search the rooftop at first. Why? Because the rooftop was supposed to be inaccessible. You needed a key. The door had an alarm. It was not a place a regular guest could just wander into on their own. But here's the thing, people staying at the Cecil reported hearing something on the roof during those nights. Not footsteps this time, no. Something heavier. Something banging. Something moving around. One couple staying on the 14th floor swore they heard a girl's voice echoing faintly from above them around 2 a.m., crying for help, but when they called the front desk, they were told it was probably pipes expanding in the cold. Pipes don't cry. Pipes don't scream. Pipes don't sound like a terrified woman begging someone to stop. But the hotel dismissed every single complaint, insisting everything was under control. And yet, something was up there with her. Something that had followed her from that elevator. Something that had been watching her from the moment she stepped inside that cursed hotel. Now, the man who emailed me said that on the night before Elisa's body was discovered, he had one last experience inside that room, one that haunts him to this day. He said around 4:30 in the morning, he woke up to the sound of water dripping. At first he thought it was coming from the bathroom, maybe the shower wasn't closed properly. But when he turned on the lights, everything was dry. The sound wasn't coming from his room. It was coming from above. From the ceiling. Soft, steady droplets. Like something wet was lying directly on top of his room, leaking slowly through the structure. But you know the part that scared him the most? The water sounded thick. Not like regular water. More like something dark. Heavy. Something that shouldn't be dripping at all. He said he stood there in the middle of the room, staring at the ceiling, and he suddenly felt this cold, suffocating sensation, like someone was standing behind him, watching him, breathing softly against the back of his neck. He didn't turn around. He didn't move. He climbed into bed, pulled the blanket over his head like a child hiding from a monster, and waited for morning to come. And this, my friends, is where part 2 ends, because what they eventually found on that rooftop, sealed inside those massive water tanks, was far worse than anything the guests had imagined. Let me know when you're ready for part 3.